In the beginning, there was a community unity service in January.
What year was that?
1995.
95. Okay, so we're talking 20 years ago.
Yes, 20
Okay.
years ago.
All right.
Because this is the beginning of the spark. Walter had been involved with a desire to minister to children, boys, years and years and years ago. God had brought me up to also have a heart for children through my church, the pastor's watch care. He encouraged ministry with children in our church. And through that, I developed a heart for children. So God had been working and working, and Wayne, working with kids forever with his employment, he had a heart for kids. So God starts the spark in your heart, and then he gives you an opportunity. And through this community unity service, they brought a gentleman down from Kansas City, Don Blakely, who started Crosslines up there, which is still going and is still a very vibrant ministry. And so he shared how you started a ministry. He shared picking your focus group that you're going to help with. He shared with you don't start a ministry in your church 7 blocks away from the ministry community that you're trying to reach. And that was the night that it was like God was talking through Mr. Blakely about the Alcott children and the need in Chanute, Kansas for something for them. And at that time, I had no idea exactly what was going to happen. And it took me 2 or 3 sleepless nights before I said, okay, God, whatever you want to do, just do it, and, I'll be your hands. And the community service was on Thursday night, and on Sunday afternoon, I called a number of people in our church to come to a meeting, and every one of them came. And Walter was one of them, with Naomi, and I had been in Walter's house once, and called him up that day and said, I think God wants something done with the Alcott kids, and I'd like, if you're free, could you come and we'll share? And all of those people showed up. And that was the beginning of Cherry Street, really was right then. Because we left the meeting all in one accord that there was a need and that we would all be committed to praying for God's leading at that point. And I just threw it out to the individuals and I said, whoever you meet this week, share with them that we need prayer, that we need to know where God wants to take us on this journey. I didn't realize it would be a journey of 20 years and so much fun, And I would meet people around town that next week who would come up and say, I'm praying about the idea. And it was those 10 people just spread throughout Chanute. And we never had to call the Tribune and say, come and take a picture. I mean, once we bought the building, the house, the little house that was here, it just, they were over here all the time taking pictures because we had so many people involved volunteering and taking off wallpaper and painting and making a ramp for Kevin Olson so he could come, through the back door. It was not a handicapped accessible house by any means, And it just, the whole community.
It did.
It was amazing, and that was the beginning. And did we have any idea what it would become? No.
But you're not sad.
No. Our mantra was always, don't put God in a box.
That's true.
And we didn't. I mean, when we built this big, huge addition back here,
Yeah.
it was like, whoa, this is big.
Mhm.
And but God raised the money.
Yep.
God raised the money. We never had to worry. You know, it was like, you take care of the children, my children, and I'll take care of the money.
Yep.
So it
And
was
you
quite a
know-
ride. It is still quite a ride. Go
And
ahead.
right in time, during that time, Barbara called Neil and I to do the praying and that brought back the memories of 20 years where we even bought a farm to start a boys' ranch. But then we started raising a family of our own, so it kind of got set back. But anyway, the way that it turned out was Barbara drove by here and she saw the house, had a sold sign on the house, And she called me, she said, there's a house there on Cherry Street, perfect, but it's sold. And I said, well, let's go talk to him and see. He might sell it. Came in and I walked in, the guy I worked with for over 40 years had bought it, So we started talking and finally told him, and we'd like to have it, and he said he would sell it back. He would sell it to us, And there was, without a penny in our pocket, we said, okay, we'll take it. And so then the money raisers came, and I think Barbara, she thought, well, we'll ask a lot of people for donations. But her husband said, no, let's just ask a few people for a lot of money, and that's what they did. And I think Barbara asked maybe 5, 6 people. They came up with the money to buy the house, and there it was. And this principal told us that if you get 6 children, be happy, First day we got 40 children. I think one at
42, the very first
And we
day.
had a little kitchen in that little 4-room house here. It was about a 6x10, wasn't it? And no place to set them. So we take them outside and set them on blankets. And my wife and a few others would fix food for them, take out and serve them on the blankets. They all had blankets. And it didn't bother us. We did it. It was the best we had, and it was good. And but anyway, unbeknown to us, we'd all, when dinner was ready to serve, everybody jump up and join hands, make a complete circle, and have prayer, And then guys was coming to me a few days later and said, I driving by Cherry Street and saw you guys praying. Said, I just pulled over and prayed for you, And so that was pretty touching, wasn't it? But that's kind of, and then Barbara and I and Naomi and some of the others, we prayed and we promised God that it would be for His glory and not man. And we'd not really put anybody to glorify. There would be no human to get the glory, only God. And we tried to stay to that as much as we possibly could up through the years. And then, of course, like Wayne, he retired from teaching school, but he was a perfect bait. Anytime we needed something done, we'd say, hey, Wayne, and you didn't have to tell him how or why, just say, we need this, and he was there and done it. He turned the garage into a music room over at the other center, and you can see the on the front here where you put the canopy for the kids to stand under to keep them. This is a bus stop, pick them up in the mornings and go. And without asking, we were building to own, and we had a cement floor in our gym, and the guy came through and he said, what are you going to put on the floor? And I said, we're going to use cement. He said, well, that's too hard to use cement. I said, well, that's the best we got. So he gave us money to put a rubber floor down, Another guy came through, he said, where's your windows in the building? I said, we don't have the money to put windows in it, we're just gonna go. He said, I will buy the windows, you put them in. And this just kept going, you know, going and going. I was sitting in a restaurant one day eating dinner, me and my wife, and the guy said, I thought you guys were gonna put storm windows on the little house. I said, we do. We don't have the money, but we wanted to. And before he left, he had a big water bill. He told the children, handed it to me, he said, go buy the storm windows, put them on. You know, so it really, I don't feel like we really had to ask hard, do you know, and we decided that no matter what the gift was, I'll tell you this way first, is a guy came down and just moved here from out of town, truck driver, and he came here and stayed out here in the apartment, and we was having a prayer meeting out there, or Bible study, and he came in, and he wanted to sit in on it, see, and then he started to volunteer for, you do remember? He started volunteering at Cherry Street, but, and he's a truck driver, but he stayed here a while, and then he decided he'd move on, so he's out here working with the kids one day, and he said, I want to give you a donation to Cherry Street, and he handed me a check, and I put it in my pocket. I thought, that's fine, you know. I figured $100, you know. So later in the day, I pulled it out and looked at it, it's $1,000, you know. So we decided then we wasn't going to put a price on the donations. It was whatever it was something that God could use and make it do what he wanted to do. So did you ever feel stressed for the donations so far? Have you ever felt stressed on that?
Only through my own humanness.
Nation, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I remember we needed curriculum. We wanted to have curriculum. And we had been working with the kids for quite a while at that point, maybe 6 months. And so, and that was when donations were $5, you know, a person, which they're still $5 a person, but not as many as there used to be. And so it was a step of faith that we ordered some David C. Cook, non-denominational Bible curriculum that they used in the Sunday school classrooms, and it came to $500. And this was after we had the house, and this is when we did not have $500, period. We didn't. We had a checking account, and that was it. But there wasn't $500 in it. And so the board prayed. Every time we came to an expense, we turned it over to God. And it came the day I just ordered it. And I thought, well, you know, we'll go out and we'll beg if we have to, but we really need this curriculum. And that evening, I put it in the mail. That evening, a lady from First Christian Church called me, and she said, our women's group would like to help. She said, what do you need? And I said, well, we just made a commitment to buy curriculum. I said, and she said, well, how much is it? And I said, it's $500. And she said, that's what we were going to give. And so she said, I'll go back and tell the ladies, and she actually brought the check by. And so, you know, but that is what happened. And the joke became, if you don't want it at Cherry Street, don't pray for it.
Yeah.
Because we got to the point where we wanted a copy machine. Imagine that, a copy machine, you know. And because my husband's office is 2 blocks over, well, we would run over there and make copies when we needed them. And I made the comment, you know, it'd be nice to have a copy machine. And we didn't have the money. You know, we didn't have the money. The money all went on the children. And so the board prayed about it. I mean, we prayed and we prayed. And it was a couple months before a couple of the dentists in town stopped me and said, hey, we're going to upgrade our copy machine. Do you guys have a need for a copy machine? And it was one of those old kind that the top moved back and forth to make the copy. The rollers didn't move on the inside, it was the top. And so then State Farm brought us a whole bunch of used paper. Their copy machine shot 2 pages through, and they kept the second page that was blank and couldn't run it through their machine, they said, and brought it to us, and that's what we used. And then I said, you know, a case of copy paper would be awful nice. And so we'd pray about copy paper. We prayed about everything. Toilet paper to curriculum, we prayed about. And so Walter's riding in his truck, driving to Cherry Street with a community service guy in his truck with him that needed some more community service hours, and there was a box in the middle of the street, in the highway. And Walter thought it was an empty box. So he stops and he said, you know, why don't you jump out and get that box and throw it in the back of my pickup truck, and and they turned the corner to Cherry Street and got it out. Well, the guy got out and threw it in the back, and he says, that's an awful heavy box. He said, it's not an empty box, and it was a case of copy paper. Yeah. That gave us wings for an awful long time. When we thought that God was even dropping copy paper out of the sky for us, supply your every need. It's biblical, we read it, we hear sermons about it, but until you experience something like that, you don't really understand the magnitude of God's words, that He will provide everything. That's where Don Blakely, he played such an important role in our starting, because he was available. I could call up there and talk to him, and how do you get this thing off the ground, and where do you go, and all these different things for someone who had no experience starting a ministry at all could ask. And he was so instrumental in what he said that night, as well as helping me later. But it kept resonating, some things through those sleepless nights that he had preached about, and being in the community that you're wanting to minister to. And we knew that as a church because we did the milk. That was when the kids used to get milk every morning, and our church would help with the milk costs for kids who didn't have it. And we would help with other things, coats and stuff for the Alcott kids. And so it was really clear to me where our audience, probably is not the right word to use, but the children's needs, where they lived, what we needed to minister to. And so I just wandered around up on the north end of town. I knew it had to be across north of Cherry Street. And there were some buildings, old grocery stores and different shops up here that were vacant, that looked like, it could be. Not having any idea of what we really needed. I mean, there was no committee that brainstormed, well, what do we need? Well, what do we need? God was telling us what we needed, and He was going to figure it out. We just had to go along for the ride. And it was very difficult. I just found nothing anywhere that I thought was suitable. And so then when I saw the for sale sign, and I just sat in front of the house for a long time, and praying. And school was out. While I was sitting there, school dismissed. And there's a crossing guard on that highway, right at that corner. And I saw all these kids walk across with the crossing guard and walk right past this building. And it was just it. It was just it. There was not a question after that. Well, where should we do this? It was here. And I remember talking to God and saying, well, we'll need this building, and we'll need empty lots for them to play on. Well, a house up here isn't hard to find, but where are you going to find one beside an empty lot? And then I thought, well, you can always walk back to Alcott with the kids and play there. But God even provided the empty lot next to us. It was all empty there. And the gentleman who had this house also had the empty lots. There had been houses on all along there that had been torn down long before. It was rough. It was a rough lot.
Yep.
I remember Murray Brown he would bring his little bobcat and try to level it down, and
Yep.
it was all volunteer, when he
Yep.
was a member of Kiwanis not the JCs, Kiwanis or Rotary or something,
Rotary,
and
yeah.
they all came and worked that land down for the playground. And when I called the gentleman, I called the realtor and said, who bought that? He gave me the name of the guy, didn't know the guy. Called him up and I asked him, how much are you asking for that? How much, if you were to sell that, he said. I said, how much would you be asking? And he said, $29,000. Because I tried to talk him into renting it to us. Here's the human part again. I tried to talk him into renting it to us for a year because I figured we could find people willing to help with that. And I said, won't you just rent it to us for a year? And he said, no. He said, I'm not going to rent it to anybody, he says. But he said, I would consider selling it again, because that's what he did. He bought houses, fixed them up, and then resold them. And so we came, and like Walter said, he opened the door, and they both said, how are you doing? And it was old time week, and after 20 minutes, the man said, well, he said, I see those kids. I see them walk by here every day. He said, I'm here late at night working, and he said, I see them, 5-year-olds, at 11 o'clock at night roaming the streets up here. He said, they need this. They really need this. And he said, I'll sell it to you for $19,000. Well, we'd already made $10,000 right there, He wanted 29, and then he came down to 19. So, it was God from the beginning.
I think the biggest thrill I got, I never have had the opportunity to work with the kids. Now, my granddaughters has worked with the kids, but I've never had the opportunity. But my biggest thrill was when we put the playground equipment in, and the day that we let the kids come in. A little girl, and I'm going to cry. A little girl came up on it. She said, "Oh, this is wonderful! Oh, we just had so much fun here," and it would just filled your heart,
Yeah.
And it was helping those kids, and it's what the Lord wanted.
Well, tell you a little more about Wayne too. His granddaughter came here and volunteered, and her dream, I think I heard her say that she'd like to see a cherry tree in every town, and she worked with that in mind. Went to college, and I think she has some to do with one in Kansas City now, doesn't she?
She's working as a gardener with immigrants, teaching them how to garden and how to market their food.
Yeah. Similar
So
to-
she loves it.
Yeah.
She got her start here.
She did. Both of them did. They're just beautiful girls.
And
Yeah.
also both grandsons has volunteered
Very good.
to help here, and that's one of the things I wanted them to realize, that God gives you opportunities, and you got to look for them and take them, and you don't get compensated. Your compensation's later.
Yeah. I think if you just put it to money-wise, why Wayne has probably donated as much as anybody, if not more, in time, and so. And not only that, he used it as a teaching tool to the children, the boys, and things to give back to the community. To be willing to give back to for income, and he did a good job of that. So. I told about the 4th April Fool, didn't I? I told you that story, didn't I?
Not today.
Did I tell you
You
guys?
told me.
Oh, I just told you. Well, Kevin, he had his car, his wheelchair out here, and he'd give him kids a ride, and down there, and he'd go fast and run. And I don't know, someone had shut the gate on him, and he had a little girl on the back, and he took off, and he hit that gate and run through it, and she kicked his straw, you know, he worked it with a straw in his mouth, it's the only thing he had. She kicked it out, and here he goes right down the street, and he's going as fast as he could go, and all of a sudden, a little girl come running into me, and she had eyes that big. She said, "Kevin needs you," and it's no April Fool's joke either. And I went out there, and he'd sit there, and he'd run his wheelchair underneath his own van to
Parked across the street.
across the street,
Yes.
and he's standing there, the wheels are still spinning, trying to go, you know, to go. And I thought that pretty well introduced us to Kevin, you know. But I had to say this, there could have been nobody more perfect for the job than Kevin, because he reached those children's heart without saying a word, you know. In other words, if you saw a crowd that was around Kevin, the kids were just attracted to him like a magnet. They would come to him, you know. And it was good. I don't know if you read Kevin's book or not, but he mentioned the fact that, you know, if you wanted to learn about children, you should be around children, you know. And he thought it was a pleasure. He wrote a book, and he thought it was a blessing that he got to be here and be with the children and learn what they done. But he was the blessing himself,
Yes.
you know. And even in the garden, even in the wheelchair, he did more than probably 3 people could do on their feet, you know, with those children. He taught them from pushing to shoving to be gentle and kind to one another. You know, I want to tell you one other thing about our money. It could go on forever, so you just have to stop us, you know. But I went down to renew my insurance to a guy here in town, you know, and he said, "Where in the world you guys get all that money to run that True Street like that?" And I said, "Well, it's donated." He said, "Well, I want to give to it." And I said, "Well, we'd be happy." He said, "We have more sickness in that part of the town than any other part." He said, "They get pneumonia, they get the flu and all the stuff." And he says, because as they came home after school and they sat down on the curb for 3 to 5 hours waiting for their parents to get home to work, they can't even get in their own house. So he started contributing to Church Street on that purpose, you know, that he saw it was a blessing to get those children in out of the weather and stuff and keep the sickness down. You know, so, and then we had the two women that school teachers. They were our, what was it they wrote?
Macaroni and cheese.
Macaroni. They were the people. That's right, you know. We send it home with the kids. We fix it for the kids, and we didn't know, but they kept us well supplied, you know.
They did.
And the one of the ladies, Bob will probably tell you, she contributed a lot of money to Cherry Street. She left it to Cherry Street to go, you know. But they sure made the sales around our town, and they bring a truckload of mac and cheese every day, you know. Yeah, and it just so many blessings just kind of fell out of the sky, and it got where I didn't even flinch when it happened, because I knew where it's coming from. You know, no, I used to think, well, man, I was lucky here, we got this, but I realized it wasn't me, it was God's work, you know, and it was so simple to fall in and start teaching. One of the pastors, he was teaching the little kids up here at Alcott, you know, was using that, they're always under construction, and teaching them Bible studies, Bible verses and things. You probably remember that little kid got up and kicked his feet and he said, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." I said, "That's all I hear around here." I said, "I'm getting out." Sat there, and the pastor sitting there with his mouth open, not knowing what to do. But the little guy, in a few days, he came back, and he probably was got the star for memorizing and knowing the most Bible verses, in the whole group. So patience showed off there. Rick, I don't know if it's patience or just bewildered, but and this same little guy, Barbara could tell you that, but there's another little guy that he wasn't the same guy, but he was out on the playground down at school, and the teacher, Margaret Badeau, she saw him bristle up to a guy, and she said, I knew there was going to be a fight. And he said, finally, the kid turned around and walked away. And she asked him, said, how come you walk away, that you didn't go ahead and do the fight that you started? And he said, well, they taught us down Cherry Street that wasn't the right way to get along. So he walked away from it.
If you could describe Cherry Street in one word, what would it be?
I would probably think, to me, blessing. In other words, I think that God blessed the sinner when they do it. So I would say blessing would be would that describe it to you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. God does things in awesome ways, and this is one of his awesome things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. So unique and different and
Mhm.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just been a good ride, and there's very little contention here when they get rent to people. I mean, just, you might say no. They came with a tender heart and a love for children, to volunteer and to work, and so they was just pretty good to get along with all the way through. And the ones that didn't have the children at heart, they didn't come. So, just how it was. So we had some beautiful, beautiful things happen, and it didn't scare you. It didn't scare me. I mean, I just thought, well, God knows what He's doing, and it just, thought, well, okay, that's, and I never felt like I was a bit of the cause of it. I felt like God was the one that was doing the same way. Barbara, she worked day and night on it, but she didn't take no credit for any of the significance of Cherry Street, other than just the fact that it was working,
It was a blessing to be able
And,
to be here.
I want to tell you one other thing, because I can keep you all night. But this same guy that was sitting in the restaurant, gave me the money for the, he was telling Barbara, I think he told Barbara, said, we was at the restaurant, we started eating, said my daughter said, as a granddaughter sitting there and she wasn't eating. And we asked her, said, what's the matter? And she said, well, we always pray at Cherry Street before we eat. And he said, we do now. So,
That's right. That's right. Barb, what would you say in one word? How would you describe Cherry Street?
I think love. God's love for the children, the staff's love for the children and for each other, the love of the children to us. To me, it's just a magnificent picture of what unselfish love is. He sure understood how highly God values his children, to do so much for the children, and yet they gain so much learning about him, And now the kids are older.
yeah.
I was at a birthday party for my grandchild, and there were two gals there who had grown up at Cherry Street, were some of the first ones through. And the topic turned to what a difference that it made for them to have some place to come. And they both have children now. And they were talking about, because they were from divorced mothers, and how they just, that was their thing to come and to do and to be a part of. Not just that, but to be safe and to be warm and to eat, The boy that said, Jesus, 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 that's all you talk about around here. He came back when he was in middle school and volunteered. And he works in town. He has a wife and children. Some of the children come from horrific homes that would never have had a chance to have been introduced to Jesus Christ had they not been here. And so it's just amazing to get to see them now and to have them say, I know who you are. And to say, I went to Cherry Street. And then some of them, we can even remember their names.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying why, but I'm just saying they were just very, loving children. We loved them all.
Some of them kick you on the
Yeah.
ankles and bring the blood, but you had to love them.
Yeah, and they, they remember the good times. And so that's saying a lot. I mean, 20 years later, when they still remember coming here and remember, they talked about things that had happened when they were here that I had forgotten, little incidences and things, but they remembered.
Yeah.
So that's really something to be a part of a child's life, so that they remember things like that.
The feeling you get from watching how the kids have progressed, how they've enjoyed themselves, it's amazing. It's really heart touching for me, and I don't get to be around them a lot because a lot of times the projects we do is in the summertime or whenever the kids aren't here. But I've talked with my grandchildren that they were part of Cherry Street. My two granddaughters had worked in it, and it helped to develop their life too. Because one of them, she decided maybe it was her calling to help people doing similar stuff, only she's doing it with immigrants. And then my other one is a teacher, and she works with kids every day doing the same thing. And then both grandsons have learned the importance of donating and to take projects on and where they live, and how important it is to help God do His work here. And so from that aspect, that's where I get it. That's where, it's really been special.
Well, I know a lot of reasons why, but the main thing is that my thought is to seeing the children grow from where they were to where they are now, and see the families. And I say this, when we first started, why the children, none of them was in the sports at the schools, and so we bought them equipment stuff and put them in the after-school sports, and the parents wouldn't even take them to the practice. We hauled them to the practice, but then after a while, where you could see the parents sitting down the street a half a block away watching, and it took them almost a full year to move up to the benches to watch their children in football and stuff practice, So I've seen them grow from that kind of stage of no care for the children to really wanting to do something to make their children more suitable for life, even the parents. It changed the parents, it changed the child, it changed me, and it changed the people working here. They just get a blessing out of doing that. And you can see God at work in your own vision,
As far as volunteering, I don't know where else there's a lot of wonderful places in town to volunteer. But I just think Cherry Street's the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they say there's all these jingles that if you volunteer, you'll live longer and you'll feel better and all these things. Well, I don't know about living longer, but I do know that it gives you bounce to your step when you can share love and get it tenfold back from these children. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. And for something as simple as sitting and reading a book to a child, and the child sits right here, and they hang on your every word, or they read the book to you, and the warmth that you feel from that child is just, no money could ever provide that in your heart. No money, there's not a dollar amount that could provide that love and feeling of self-worth in a volunteer's heart that that child gives to you through volunteering. It's for an hour a day, once a week, once every other week, whatever. It's such a little amount to expend. Even if you help in the kitchen or something, you're still in a joyful atmosphere, in an atmosphere that we're doing this for the children. And what better to ministry to work in than that, like Walter said, changes children's lives. These are the kids that you will see in the restaurants. Anyway, 20 years ago, these kids that are still in town are now in the restaurants, they're in the nursing homes, they're, possibly working in the hospital. They stay in town. Mm-hmm. They stay in town. They're not moving away to the big cities to do, high-paying jobs. They're here. They're here. And that's what Chanute needs to remember, that they want the younger generation here. They don't want them floating off to Kansas City and New York and all these places. But we need to invest in those kids. We need to invest our time. We need to invest our money so that they will, in turn, be there when in our older ages we need them. We think we don't need them. They're disposable children. Some societies feel they're God's kids.
My wife's in the nursing home, and there's 3 girls that graduated from Cherry Street, you might say, and she's getting a lot of hugs from those 3 girls. And they're kind and tender, and they're found a need for their life, They're getting into it, and it's a blessing to her. So it's just like it's coming back home to Naomi for her time she spent with them. They're giving it back to her now. So, and I can go home and not worry about she's going to get good care, because those girls are there.
I know, I've talked to one of them, and yeah, she started the conversation out with Naomi. Yeah,
Wow.
and that's what we're saying. We hadn't even been here very long, maybe 4 or 5 years, and we were hearing back from SRS and the police department that the calls for domestic violence and such had dropped dramatically since Cherry Street had been here. So, yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. The kids soak up like a little sponge the Bible verses, and even the books that we read. We do as many Bible stories as we do, really other fiction books from the library, and they just soak it up. They just soak it up, and then when they learn their Bible verses and stuff, they do store it in their hearts for the tough times, and there are tough times. There really are. In Chanute, Kansas, there's lots of tough times.
Well, and I tell you, one other thing that, when that Cherry Street started, for the children down here, they had no intentions of ever going to college. In other words, it's just a cut thing. And they told us so at first, said, we're never going to college because we can't afford it. My folks already told us we couldn't afford it. So Barbara was wise enough, she started inviting the college students out here to talk to them about ways that they could go to college, you know. And they'd come and tell the kids that there was ways that they could go to college and, you know, get scholarships, so forth. And it's worked out. Some of them are going to college. You give out several scholarships a year for college, you know. So that pulled them from that place. They could have a hope of going and better their education, you know.
Jeremiah 29:11 was our Bible verse for many, many, many years, because it says that I have a plan for you, and plans not to harm you, but to give you hope in a future. And so we would pretty much get down to the nitty-gritty when we talked to the kids. We always set them in a circle and had circle time. And when these kids would come, and even the staff, the volunteers, high school kids, when they were getting ready to graduate, we'd have them sit down because they were mentors to these children. And we'd say, well, you know, why do you want to go to college? Well, I just want to go to college and I'm going to be whatever. And I said, well, if you didn't go to college, would you be a bum? Well, yeah, probably so. You know, and we would keep talking to the kids. God has a plan, God has a plan, God has a plan. God has a what? Plan, you know.
Yeah.
And so they did move from, I cannot do something like that, to, oh, maybe I could do that. And yeah, we're seeing kids go out here to the junior college that we never dreamed, you know, years past, with their attitude when they came in to Cherry Street, would never have tried to achieve that. And it's so exciting, you know, to see that. And Thelma Rowe was a retired school teacher and had no children. And so when she passed away, she left us her estate. And that we put in to the foundation, which we have, so that that money would grow. Walter had always said we needed to save 10% and give back to the kids of Cherry Street somehow. And so out of that, her money could be used for food, education, and one other thing. Maybe it was the curriculum that we used. Anyway, so we set aside, that's where the money for the scholarships comes from, and that's why it's called the Thelma Rowe Memorial Scholarship. And so we award scholarships to children who have attended Cherry Street for an entire year. They do have to get 2.0 or above GPA, and that's pretty, you know, a lot of children would qualify for that.
Yeah.
This last year, we had somewhere around 40 children who had graduating, who had attended Cherry Street in years, at least 1 year total. But not all of those kids are still in Chanute. It's a very mobile part of society that we work with. In fact, there were times when we started 20 years ago when the child would go out to get into the car was full to the brim with clothes or something, and that was the last time we saw the child, and they left town. And the child didn't know it, that they were leaving. And so it has slowed down a little bit, but there are a lot of children that we ministered to, a lot of foster kids that came to Cherry Street that are no longer anywhere. And I've talked to one foster mother here in town and asked her, well, you know, do you ever hear from she had such a different name, Talia. And do you ever hear from her? And she was such a beautiful little child. And she said no. She said she went to Oklahoma from our foster home.
You know,
So, you know, but we had the time. We had, and we tell the volunteers that we don't know how long that we will have this child, that God will give us this child to work with. So if you don't do anything else in a day with the child, give him a hug. Give him a
Yeah.
hug. And, you know, they do so much more, but just give him a hug.
You think you get more out of it than the children do? Is it God's plan for that children to be given to you for your benefit?
very likely could be, it works, you know, and you can't knock it one way or the other, which is the best, you, the child, or you, but it's worth every minute of it for your own benefit, you know. I feel I grew more in Christianity than I'd ever grew the rest of my whole life before that time, you know. In other words, it was a growing stage for me, and it's something I can't forget easy. You know. I
You could
want to tell
easily-
you that if Hillary Clinton ever said anything right, she said one thing, and that she said it takes a village to raise a child, and she was 100% right on that. So,
It's true.
so give her at least one A plus.
You know something? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I think, Chris, your question, I think we'll only find that out in eternity. You know, I really do. I know we started May the 1st. January is when the vision came, or the vision that God wanted something done. We really didn't know what he wanted until March when we bought the house
Of 96.
of 95, 2
95.
months later. And we opened May the 1st
Of 95.
of 95.
And it became Cherry Street because that's where it's located? Or did you have a
We
different
talked
name
about-
without that?
We talked about, well, do we name it Thelma Rowe?
Yeah,
You know, do we name it the Rankin House? What do we, and the executor said absolutely no. Do not put her name in it,
yeah.
you know? And he was right, because look how large, I mean, this is God's house. And yes, so that, it became Cherry Street. But we've had 6 kids, I think we're up to 6 now, maybe it's 7, who have been killed and died, who came to Cherry Street. And 2 of them were from that May class that we opened up, the 5th graders who were here for 1 month. And if no other reason than that, because the one, you know, was baptized before he was killed, you know. That was one life that is now in eternity, you know, because of Cherry Street. So, we don't know. But I know the 2 girls that were talking at the birthday party are both Christians now.
Mm.
So, and we've attended baptisms of kids who became Christian from Cherry Street, you know, because they were so thrilled, you know, I'm going to be baptized, will you come? And we have, you know, we've been a part of that. So, you know, I think we have the kids that God wants to be here for one reason or another. And at the same time, it's such a blessing to all of us, you know. You can't pray for a kid all the time, and there's some that they pray for every day, you know, the
Yeah.
staff and stuff, you know.
I want to tell you another example, helping for the child or the adult gets the blessing or not. We had a guy came here on community service, you know, to help. He was kind of the tour of the town, you know, and he drinks so much alcohol and stuff the other night, but they had to put a hole in his throat for him to talk through, you know. But he came on, the judge sent him to work his community service off. I got to see him go out to the Santa Fe Lake and be baptized with that hole in his hand. So he went from, you might say, a drunkard to a declared Christian from here to there, you know. Another example of how God works, well, you know, we have a judge that was here in town. He came and sat right on the floor and ministered
Yeah.
to the children. He said, I've seen their parents lots of times, you know.
Yeah.
And he was willing to come and sit and
Yeah.
minister to them, you
Yeah.
know, and be a helper. So that's how strong a belief he was in Cherry Street.
Yeah. Yeah.
He could see that.
Guys, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.